Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to another Account-Based Fridays morning. Actually, now it's afternoon or approaching afternoon, depending on where you're at in the US or outside the US. We got another great conversation today around AI. And just listening to our warm up conversation, Luis Rodriguez has an unbelievable background on AI. I didn't realize how many different flavors there are of AI. And we're going to do a deep dive today into some of those flavors. But every week, and actually before we start with the poll, which we do every week, I'm going to point to the upper right-hand corner to like and subscribe. If you have best practice issues that you're trying to get around sales, marketing, AI, we've got a whole YouTube channel of content. And of course, if you have specific questions, you can always DM either Meg or myself, and we can point you in the right direction so you don't have to sift through 170 videos, but there's a treasure trove of information. So we'd encourage you to like and subscribe in the upper right-hand corner. Each week we start off with a poll, this week no different, and we oriented it toward AI and had four choices around where in the sales and marketing processes are people seeing the value of AI. And I had voted improve lead generation and qualification efficiency, but and N was 12 here, so it wasn't very big. That said, I did go back through some prior polls, and we had asked some related questions on this. And by an order of magnitude in those prior polls, it was saying almost the same thing that this was saying, which was C, optimizing content creation and distribution was the number one use case right now for AI. But Meg, what was your view on this?
Yeah, I think I picked the second one as well, just because I think people are so keenly focused on lead gen right now. But it's very clear that there are a lot of use cases emerging, and some of which I think we're not even necessarily thinking about broadly in B2B go-to-market at the moment, which is why, pardon me, we're super excited to welcome Luis Rodriguez today. Who is at a company called AccreteAI, which is in a space that I think not enough people know about, called Composite AI. And he has incredible background on really the leading edge of research around AI and other aspects of Internet of Things and a variety of stuff. I'll let Luis do it justice, I won't. But we're really excited to have him here today to help us learn more. And Luis, from your incredible vantage point, what do you think is the most common use case out of these four?
I think the content creation is what I've seen kind of all around what people are using it for, but that's only kind of scratching the surface of what the generative AI, because that's the interesting thing. You ask AI here. I think the form of AI that people are most familiar with is the one that you hear on the news all the time, like ChatGPT, from OpenAI. So they're using this AI and they can ask it questions, and so everywhere from sales, marketing, even to education, they're using it to create content. But there are other more sophisticated ways that people are starting to use, not just generative AI, but multiple forms of AI, which, to your earlier point, is that's what composite AI is, at using multiple different forms of AI and multiple different ways of engaging.
Excellent. Well, and thank you for that. I'd love to take a moment before we get started with covering a variety of different topics for you to share a little bit about your background and your company. Tell us about, sort of how you've evolved your participation in the evolution of AI, and a little bit about AccreteAI.
Yeah, so I've been at a variety of different companies. IBM is where I really took advantage of getting into what was then called Smarter Planet, or now called IoT. And you start looking at the different use cases, and AI was even used back then. This is, IBM Watson came out as was our big showcase one. But over time, as AI has gotten better, as computation power has got increased and so on, this has led to a point where now you can have these large language models, you can have very large computation hungry AI types of AI that are now available to everybody, right? They've started to become democratized. And I think that's just a journey that I've been on. And it's been really fun to see it evolve and see what kind of use cases are being used. And it's not just IoT and edge anymore. It's, like you said, sales, marketing, go-to-market is a big consumer of that technology.
Yeah, and I'm interested. You've also had education background in this space, so it's been around longer than most people think. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a PhD from MIT, and I was at the MIT AI lab there too. So we learned about the kinds of things that you could do, but were computationally like not viable back then, and how you can do it on your phone, right? So it's been a while in the making.
Yeah, but now it's kind of exciting to see where it's going. Let's start out with a little bit of a, a kind of a, we'll call it a mini course on, how would you categorize the different types of AI that in particular people in the go-to-market space need to understand?
Yeah, so I'll start with the generative AI, which is the one that is the large language models. So I think the way to think about that one, that I find easiest, is it's almost like predictive. So you give it a prompt, and then it tries to predict based on everything it's learned what's coming next. And if you think about it that way, it explains why it's good at some things and why it's not good at some things. Like, for example, it's really terrible at citations, and the reason it's terrible at citations is because if you ask it to write a paper and then create citations, what it does is it creates the citations that it predicts would most likely be able to substantiate the claims in what it wrote. Not that the citation is right or that it points to something real or even something that is true, just what's most likely to be there. So in that way, that's why think of it as AI that grabs onto the strongest signal, right? That it grabs onto the strongest signal amongst all of this. And it's also very general. So I'll talk a little bit more later about, I can talk about how to make it more specific, but it's very general. That's one type of AI. There's another type of AI that we use in our company, Accrete, as well, which we developed, which is more about finding the signal in the noise. So there's a lot of noise, and you're trying to find the signal. So it's kind of the opposite, right? The large language models are generative. They try to find the largest signal. They don't look for the little signals. And then there's ours that knows that there's a lot of noise, and you try to find it. So and when you start using multiple types of AI, like we use both types of AI, that's when you get into composite AI. So for anyone who's looking for a vendor that uses AI, it's a good question to ask them, is to say, like, what types of AI? And if they only use one type, maybe try to look for a vendor that uses multiple types, and depending on what you're looking for.
Do the okay. Yeah, so I was just building off of the composite AI there. That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about the different areas. Like, to me, I just see the tools, and I'm like, oh, it's another tool, another eight. Like, to me, they were all the same kind of flavor, but very interesting about the composite and the different variations. Um, like, do you see any kind of combinations working better in certain use cases then? Like, for example, like I think of the use case of sales and marketing and trying to get sentiment of maybe a prospect wanting to buy or interested in the product or maybe not interested in the product. Would different types of AI be applicable to that situation, or just stick with a large language model? Like, when do you make that switch to composite?
Yeah, so the composite, especially like if you're trying to do market research, understanding social media, you really want a blend of different types of AI and also non-AI. The composite is like blending different types of AI, but also non-AI. So, for example, if you're trying to understand a narrative that you see evolving, like you one day you find out that they're talking about your product, some group of entities are referring to the type of product that you have. You want to be able to analyze that narrative and understand, is this thing going to go viral? Are they saying things that are true or aren't relative to your ground truths? What could I make it? How could I make it go viral, or how could I counter it if it's not benefiting me? And so to do that kind of thing, you need to have a type of AI that understands the natural language, understands virality, right? Understands the different aspects of that of what's happening, and is also able to find other using that is able to find other entities that are also involved in a possible viral narrative, and what they're saying. And so and if you can do that, then you can better manage what might be something really great, or what might be something, like we've seen, there's some narratives that take down companies, or brands, and that didn't used to be like a thing until it became a thing. right? And so I think that it's important to do, and it's not just go to market. There's other things that can impact your company. For example, that your stock price might be influenced by some narrative that comes out and says something. We actually we do this kind of research. We found that remember when the Pentagon blew up and it ended up being like a fake thing. We found that that was because of a set of Russian bots, and they did that because they something happened with the war that they're in, and they didn't want it to come out on the world stage, so they made a distraction. So you think about this, if you have this kind of analytical ability, what then you use the large language model for is to help you navigate those waters. So to summarize narratives for you, to in a multi-agent way to better understand virality, for example. I can get into multi-agency, but now it becomes a complement, not the thing that actually figures things out. It becomes something that summarizes or that tries to create content, like we talked earlier, like a counter narrative.
When you think about the social media use case, what are some of the ways you mentioned a really interesting one about finding, sort of the source of a narrative and so that you can go and debunk it? Feels like this could have implications for competitive intelligence, for finding out who's most interested in products. What are some of the ways that you see people using it?
Yeah. So one of the ways is that they're looking for sets of entities that matter but aren't necessarily easy to find to begin with and to reach. So like one of the customers that we had was looking for moms networks of moms that communicate through social media but don't necessarily have like a Facebook group or something like that. They're a group of folks and then finding who they are, what they're talking about, what's interesting, what's not, the narratives that are there. So you can do that as well in terms of B2B, right? Finding groups of people who maybe use your product and see what their experiences are, or maybe use your competitors' products and see what they like, what they don't like. So I think that's that kind of intelligence of understanding what might take an army of people now takes like a set of AI agents that come together to figure this stuff out. You could also, there's places it's interesting because some of this stuff, the reasons people talk about your product may not have to do with just the features of your product or your service. They could also have to do with with narratives that are adjacent, like what political party they're part of, or what part of the country they live in. And so being able to have a way to go and start understanding the narratives, the adjacent narratives, for you and your competitors, is going to become like a mainstay, and customers who can do that better than others are going to be able to react to that intelligence in a more sophisticated way.
It's really interesting. And thinking about, and this may be an unfair question, what about the security ramifications of AI, particularly with the composite AI? When you've got these agents talking with one another, are you archiving sensitive information, either in the generative AI or other flavors of AI, that could be used by the competitors later? Or like, do you firewall that? What are you seeing security trend wise?
Yeah, it's a great point, because I won't name the company, but I think everyone can find there's a company that said, hey, I'm going to put all my stuff into the large language model, and then the other people were able to access it. That's why you want composite AI, because there's, like, for example, the insights that we derive, we don't feed those into the large language model. We just use the large language model as a way of interacting with the insights that we have, of summarizing the insights that we have. So there's a little bit of leakage from that perspective, but we're not taking the whole database and tossing it in. So that's another reason why, like I mentioned earlier, it's a good for executives to really have a strong set of questions for the vendors that they use, because some of these vendors might not, they'll look the other way and they'll throw in a bunch of stuff. And how do you know as an executive whether how the data made it into your data made it into the LLM. So you need to have that. We actually, from our perspective, this is a really important thing for us because we do work with the federal government. So that's another way that you can, if you have a vendor that also works with the federal government, there's certain security arrangements that they have to have in place. So that's a good check mark to go and see, to kind of cross validate that they're, it's called FedRAMP, like FedRAMP approved, that they have all the right safeguards around security.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is to make sure, that the vendors you're working with in this space are really considering the safety of your information. And to your point, a good way to do that is to see who else they're working with and how sensitive those people are about security. That's going to help you. But you just raised kind of an interesting point around the use cases for understanding kind of signal to noise. It sounds like a lot of this is coming out of B2C, which really relies on narratives that might be hard for your average brand manager to tap into. So they're really paying attention to what's happening externally. How do you, and you also mentioned kind of an overlap with Internet of Things and the types of AI that we're using. How do you see kind of some of those B2C use cases moving over into the B2B space? What would you encourage people to anticipate?
Yeah, so I think the one of them that I'll kind of dig into a little bit is that there's there's looking at the narratives, right, that we talked about, and there could be B2B narratives as well, because there are groups out there that talk about, they love a product, they talk about, SAP or whatever it might be that they want to understand because they want to solve problems. But I think the kind of one of the next generation things that's going to happen is that there's this notion of multi-agency. So so when you prompt a large language model, you can prompt it to become an agent. Like you can say, you are an expert at writing copy for social media, or you are an expert at designing campaigns, you are an expert at running campaigns, and so you give it you write a sophisticated prompt, and you can have these different agents that then start talking to each other, because you have a coordinating agent that then just starts talking to them, and those agents can use not only the large language model facilities, but any insights that you may have, like local databases about containing intelligence about your customers or your competitors, right? So then now you're starting to mix things in by having specific agents. Then the agents become more less generalized and more able to look to address their specific roles. They can work together, and now you have a team. You can make your own team of agents. Like if you, this is especially important if, like, let's say you have 3 people on your team, but you're missing like 4 others that you just don't have budget for. Well, create agents to have those roles and have the people and the agents all interact together. And now you can start doing things like using that approach to do things like trying to figure out how do you better find leads? How do we better qualify them? What are the kinds of things that you might, campaigns that you might put out there, that because, people only work a certain number of hours, right? But agents, you can have so many agents floating around. Like they're putting campaigns, they can do 20 campaigns and be working for you overnight, doing these kinds of things together. And so now that it's changing the nature of how you interact internally. And if you can train the agents to also interact externally, because they, part of the campaign might be interacting with an agent who's an expert in the products or services that you sell, right? And so you start training them, and when you get comfortable with them, that become maybe how you qualify a lead, and then you move from there. So I think there's a lot of, this is an open area of research, and this whole multi-agency. There's also long-term memory, so that the context of the agents can remember things and have longer-term memory and interact together. This is kind of the next wave that's coming in, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on B2B.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that too. Like we hear from so many companies, do more with less. and there's so much pressure, particularly around, well, every company's under pressure right now, but go to market investment, sales, marketing, customer success. If you can have agents augmenting as opposed to people augmenting, I don't know if we're there yet, but there could be a day where that's not too far off, where instead of doing that new hiring, you're relying on the agent to do that communication. It does bring up an interesting question. I think we were even talking about it before we got on the call, with the different universities and different age groups here. What kind of skill sets do you feel like companies should be hiring for or training towards to help enable people in this AI world? Like, you've got multiple degrees from MIT. You're likely the exception rather than the rule, but what should the average company be thinking about right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've had conversations with folks who around this specific question as well, and the numbers that I'm hearing are that probably about roughly, this is just a broad average, around 10 to 15% of the people in the current workforce have the proclivity to be able to work the large language models. And they tend to be ones that have some kind of technical background, like a computer science background. And those are the ones that seem to be most likely to be the forward people that know how to really take these models to the next level, the multiple agents, all that kind of thing. So I would say that the first thing is to find those people in the company that have that, that just naturally they're trained, have enough technical background to be able to understand how to use English instead of Python or C++ or something, to use English to communicate with a model and learn how to use it. It's just like Google, right? When you first use Google, all of us, like, we type in some things where maybe we don't get exactly what we want, but now we're experiencing it, so we know what to tell it to give us what we want. Same thing for prompts, but now you're talking English. It could be paragraphs. So a prompt could be several paragraphs long if you want to be really sophisticated. So you find those people and then see if they want to help with coming up with use cases to help the company do better, right? Whether it be go to market or whether it be writing code, because these models can write code as well. But you find those folks on the other side of the pipeline. What you want to do is find out which colleges that you like already. Probably companies like certain colleges. Which ones are forward thinking when it comes to AI? Because right now there's a big battle in academia, and the question is whether the pedagogy, the education, is it okay to use AI in education or not? Right? There's some people say no, you shouldn't be using it, because how are you going to learn how to write, or how are you learn how to you're going to use it to answer all the test questions that we have? And others are saying, other universities are very forward and saying you have to use it. How can we possibly graduate students that don't know how to write prompts? Same thing that happened back when spreadsheets or calculators or you name it come out. The technology advances, and then there's a pedagogical question, education question around it. So I would say to try to harvest what you have now, and then start hiring from very, very tech forward universities where students will come out already having more formally trained in how to use that not just the large language models, but other types of AI as well.
Yeah, good advice for sure. We want to find the people who are embracing new technology, because I think we all know what happens if you don't. Um, you can fight it, but you're not going to win. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, if you're comfortable, Luis, answering this, because you've been able with your company to accomplish something a lot of people probably listening to this would love to accomplish, which is getting picked on Gartner's cool vendor list. That's an achievement. Any advice for people who would like to get their product on the radar? Kind of, how did you engage with the appropriate analysts, and what kinds of things would you suggest for people to do to make sure they're getting the most out of, one, their advisory membership, but two, position their product in a great light, especially since yours is in a new category? That's even harder.
Yeah, it's so I'm the one who drove that. So I was the one who, because I've got a lot of Gartner experience. But I would say the first thing is go in thinking about setting a baseline of partners, of Gartner analysts that you want to get familiar with. You want them to be familiar with what you do. You want and tier it out, like to have a top tier of like, these are the ones that are most relevant to what I'm doing as a company, and make sure you focus on them. And it'll be very telling. Like if they think that you're boring, or they think that I've seen this before, you'll find that real quick, and that should inform like either your messaging or what your value prop is. But if they see something unique, they'll quickly see it. And so that's when you start broadening that out to other analysts. And that's the main thing, is that you're not going to be able to get, in my opinion, you're not going to be able to get cool vendor if you're not seeing like really acute interest from the way that you're presenting what you do. And then from there, it's just elbow grease. You just got to go and have, as many of these meetings with analysts as you can, so that they know you. And then you've got to show them progress over time. You got to show them that there's progress, because they're not interested in just great ideas. They want to see that you can execute on what you're doing. So like for us, the thing that they mentioned was a platform that we're building to be able to take the AI that we do, put it into modules, and then be able to recombine those modules to solve other things. So like the social media work that we're doing, a lot of the pieces came from a product where we were trying to figure out who the next Taylor Swift was going to be in the music industry, right? And so you can, by being able to repurpose those things, that was something that they didn't see they saw very little of. And in fact, the cool vendor report, they could have put a couple more in there, because they do like 3 to 5, but they didn't max it out, because there weren't a lot of vendors doing the kinds of this kind of platform approach. And so that's why we got there.
Yeah, well, I think anyone who can figure out who the next Taylor Swift is ought to be going into that business. I think being able to predict that would be of interest to a lot of people, and a lot of tweens and teens as well. Yeah. So I think on that note, Luis, what is some advice that you would have for companies who are earlier on in their AI journey? Maybe they're just mostly using it, as our poll showed, for content creation. What would you say are the next, couple of stepping stones that they should take, and who would you see taking those steps?
Yeah, I think that the best thing to do would be to find a consultant that understands AI, and then to bring to that consultant the types of opportunities or problems that they think could really, and then do some brainstorming. Like spend a week or two doing that brainstorming, because you want to lay out a plan, and you want the person who's helping you do that know what the art of the possible is, and be able to help guide around like what kind of vendors might be used. But it can solve so many different things that people don't even realize if they're just just kind of watching it from the sidelines. And so you really need someone who understands deeply the nature of what's the art of the possible, and then just build a roadmap and start going down that. Probably at some point there's going to be the chief AI scientist, chief of AI is going to probably be a role at some point, because it's going to become so important, both for how the company operates and how his strategy evolves. But I would say it's better to get in deeper now, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And if your competitor does it and is able to change their business model and their business dynamics, very quickly, because AI can allow that to happen, then it could be very hard to recover if you didn't know that that now you've got wooden arrows and they've got howitzers, right? And so it's like you can't recover from something like that.
It makes a lot of sense. And I just noticed we're at top of the hour here in time, but time flew here on everything AI. I guess just one last question on my side. As you think about the different kind of use cases that you just walked through in hiring a consultant, as you were talking about finding a consultant, are you finding that companies know what they want when they come to, say, even your organization? Or is it more of a case of you're having to educate them on the possibilities, and then the light bulb goes off.
Well, that's a really interesting thing, because like, even for the social media one use case that I mentioned, there are a lot of potential customers who aren't in the headspace to want to take that next step to a tool that's no one else has, right? They have the equivalent of like keyword search, right? They use that, but they get a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of messy, and they don't have a tool there's not a tool out there that lets them have a clean, very specific way of getting what they're looking for. And so that's back to the point that I was saying about companies, is that the reason you want to hire one of these AI experts, there's going to be some things that you're going to keep doing this as part of your business processes that you just want to make more efficient. But what you really want to know is how you can make what kinds of changes are going to happen to the way that you practice business that can have an incredible impact on your business and on the market, right? That's what you really want to know, is like, what if you have to change everything, and how long is it going to take to do that? Because AI can facilitate that, but again, there's people, right? People are going to have to take their skills to the next level. They're going to have to learn things. They're going to have to work on finding new ways to do things, and the companies that can do that better and know how to do that using the AI, all many use cases that even that are out there, they're gonna do that. So think about when the internet, when the World Wide Web first came out, right? And everyone was just, hey, I'll just put my catalog up there or something. And then you had some people that decided, hey, let's do commerce over it, right? Let's do social media. There's these things that have had incredible changes. That's what's in front of us now. And the changes are going to be even more powerful than the ones that we've seen with the World Wide Web.
Exciting times for sure. And I appreciate you, and John and I appreciate you coming in and sharing with us a little bit more about, sort of the next steps. It's easy to get caught in the present, but the future here is pretty amazing, and it's something to look forward to for sure. So thank you for bringing that to us.
Sure,
John, any closing thoughts, or Luis, any closing thoughts?
I'll let you go first, Luis.
I would say it's almost like it's almost like you're not really at this point, you're not really doing your job if you're a professional, if you haven't opened up an account on one of these large language models and started playing with it. It's like, spreadsheets come out and you do, and you don't use it because you're like, that's for someone else to do. It's like everyone uses spreadsheets, right? So I would say, like, put that on your list, like today. Go and open it. If they're free, play with it and learn how to use it, and get your employees to do the same.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, Luis, and really grateful for you sharing your expertise, and congratulations on that Gartner Cool Vendor Award. That is not an easy thing to get. So I know you had to work pretty hard to get that. So thanks for investing time. And next week, every Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern, this one was a special time. But next week we resume our 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock GMT. We're going to have Tammy Aguian. She is the queen of sales, or I call the head of enterprise sales at DocuSign. We're going to talk all things revenue next week. Should be an exciting conversation. So look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday.